to the training webinar for Journyx Accountlink for MSD. That's Microsoft Dynamics GP. My name is Meredith Zachritz, and I'm the Director of Product Development here at Journyx, and I'll be presenting the material today. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. First, I'd like to invite you to submit questions at any time during the webinar, and you can just use that GoToMeeting tab for questions to submit those questions, and I'll answer all of those questions at the end of the presentation. Also, there is a GoToMeeting % icon that you can use to resize your screen for better viewing. So let's go ahead and jump in. I am reusing a slide deck that's also for a Accountlink demo, so please excuse, I'm going to skip some of the slides for our training purposes because I don't think you guys need a background Journyx, so we'll skip that first slide there. So our training today is going to cover the software component of the Journyx solution for integrating with GP. So your core Journyx software includes all those features that you need for customizing the system, enforcing security measures, monitoring compliance, and robust reporting. It also has automation options for making sure that you get that prompt and accurate time entry for all your types of employees, as well as the back-end processing of the data for payroll, HR, and billing. Now, in order to make your project time accounting more efficient, Journyx is offering a bidirectional integration with Microsoft Dynamics GP, and we call this Accountlink for MSD. And it gives you all of the tools that you need to get up and running on Journyx, assuming that you would need them for setup, just by using your GP data. And then, of course, it also allows you to pass your critical project time and expense data back to GP for that complete project cost accounting. So we'll go ahead and jump to our software here. Now, as I mentioned, you can get started with Journyx very easily if you already have all your employee and project information in GP. So anyone familiar with your company data can set up a Journyx site by simply importing the setup information from GP, and there aren't any technical skills required. Now, for those of you who are already using Journyx products, this would also include bringing in new information, for example, new employees and new projects from the GP system. And so we have here just an example of some of the project information in GP. Now, one thing that I'll mention, what I'm going to be showing today, right here, are the current import and export tools that are available for moving data between Journyx and GP. The data mapping options in these cases are set up by our professional services team. However, we are just a few short weeks away from beginning alpha testing of a new .NET app that will allow you to do all of the imports and exports at the same time, basically in a single synchronization, as well as control some of that data mapping for GP to Journyx data, so you wouldn't necessarily require a professional services team to set up that data mapping. But for the time being, we're going to use what is in production, and we'll be showing you the import and export tools. All of the options and data relationships that I'll talk about today in the training will apply to that .NET app. It will just be a little, instead of having to do imports and exports separately, you'll be able to control it all in one app and also have more access to that data mapping. So currently, and this will be something that will translate as well to the .NET app, you just have to set up some information in the Journyx system, that tells it where your Dynamics installation lives. And that's what all of this information here is, and how to access it so that you can then be able to pull data from it and pass data back to it. So after you enter that connection information, then if you're familiar with the Journyx import tools, you just have a click of a few buttons, a preview and an import, to pull your data in. So we'll go ahead and run a preview. Now, the previews are used in part to see if your data has any problems or any issues that need to be corrected. And the .NET application will have a similar type of preview. If you choose to do it, you can skip preview as well. Should you want to review your data and make sure that what's coming in is correct or has been set up correctly. Now, I have deliberately set up a few employees who are going to come over into the system and be set up as new employees, but I have a lot that are missing information. In this particular instance, in this particular setup, I am doing payroll in a third-party system, and so I have certain information that's required for every new employee so that that third-party system will have the information it needs to do payroll, and so that's what all my warnings and errors are for here. And then I can simply click continue to go ahead and import the data that I want to come in at this time. So what we're doing here in this particular case is employee department, project, cost category, and pay code information in GP is coming over into the Journyx system. And so what it does is it allows the employees, these new employees, to pretty much start tracking time almost immediately. And it just depends on, excuse me, how much you want to automate the process of transferring data and setting things up based on your GP data. So Accountlink gives you options to automate things like group assignments, approval plans, project access, and access to some of those other details like time tracking details in the system when it's adding new employees from GP. So this is based on your GP data. We can determine what sort of access this new employee should have in the Journyx system. Likewise, group assignments and project dependency setup can also be automated based on your GP data when you're adding new projects from GP. So there are quite a few options there that will allow you to skip the manual configuration on the Journyx side after you've brought in new employees and projects from GP. Now, of course, like most of the import tools or all of the import tools in Journyx, after you've loaded this data, and we looked at it manually so that we had some kind of process to review, your imports can be set up to work on a schedule. So you can schedule a check for new employees, and those new employees will be set up. And each of those automated or scheduled imports will have an audit report attached so that you can always go back and review what's been happening. Now, as I mentioned, you can set up everything in Journyx pretty much based on your GP data, or you can control some of the configuration in Journyx only. As an example here, we're going to be looking at an employee who, in this case, we don't track cost category access in GP. So I'm going to go ahead and add her to an all cost categories group. I am transferring my cost category information into what you may be familiar with as the activity field in Journyx. But I'm going to go ahead and put my employee in the all cost categories group, and then I'll be able to use project dependencies to ensure that she selects the correct cost category. So as I mentioned, so when I'm pulling a new employee from GP to Journyx, I have a variety of options for determining how that employee is going to be set up. First and foremost, I think most of you guys should be familiar with Journyx groups, and these are the things that give people access to the right projects and the right information in the system. And what I have are default options to set up project access groups and supervisor reporting groups. Project access groups are set up as, so my employee here, Pilar, she gets her own group, and every project that she has access to in the GP system will be added to that group. There's nothing else that's controlled in that group. It's just her project access. Supervisor reporting groups would be based on a group of employees' supervisor field. So the supervisor gets a group, and all of his or her employees are put in that group for reporting purposes. We can also take that further. If you track pay code access by employee and so on, then we also have options for setting up groups for access to some of those other time and expense tracking details. But the two defaults are the project access groups and the supervisor reporting groups. So then we move on to approval plans, and Journyx has the workflow approval plans for approving timesheets or expense sheets. And just like the supervisor reporting groups, the approval plans can be created automatically. based on the supervisor field in GP. And these will be single level approvals. So just the supervisor is the approver for that particular plan for that employee. And so every employee who has a specific supervisor will be assigned to that same approval plan. Roles. So everybody gets some sort of role in the system. The roles can be set up manually. That's something you can do after you're bringing your employees in. Or you may choose to have a particular field in GP that determines what custom role an individual is assigned to. You might think of like a title field. Perhaps somebody's title will determine what type of role they get in the Journyx system. I mentioned that project dependencies will also help to make sure that the employee gets access to the proper information. So should she select a specific project, she's only going to see the cost categories, in this case, that apply to that project. And then finally, accrual balances can be transferred from GP into the Journyx system. However, most of our employees have actually opted to do their accrual management in Journyx because we have more options and more flexibility in calculating those accruals. And so that's why you'll notice in the package for GP, the accrual calculator is included. So let's go ahead and log in as an employee now that we've got our information imported. And as I mentioned, she gets a specific role based on a field in GP that can determine it, or we might have, in this case, she got a specific role based on the field in GP, or we might have manually assigned a role to her. And of course, all the information she has, everything she has access to up here is based on that role. Now, she's assigned to a grid time entry screen, but you have the option to use whatever type of entry screen you're comfortable with. And then, of course, as I mentioned, based on her department and project assignments, then she gets access to the correct details in her other tracking columns. Now, when she selects a project for time entry, we can see that our dependencies, our project dependencies come into play. And so our cost categories change to show what is specific to this project. And again, this was something that was configured in GP. And the integration automates the setup of those dependencies so that she can only choose the correct data. Now, as part of the Accountlink for MSD package, Journyx also provides the tools and data validation that we need to make sure that our employees enter their time accurately and on time. So, of course, the approval plans can include email reminders and late notices as that timesheet period draws to a close. And we can also run data validation at the time that the employee submits her timesheet to make sure that she's entered her time correctly. So before any approver becomes involved, you get to set up your own time entry rules that are checked when an employee submits his or her timesheet for approval. And so the rules can, for example, automatically reject the sheet if it breaks those rules. And then the employee is able to correct the timesheet before it's finally submitted for approval. And we have just a simple rule set up here where she's required to enter 40 hours a week. It tells her exactly what to do, and she can correct it and get it approved. Now, at the same time that these data validation rules are applied, custom billing rates and payroll rules can also be applied to the time for reporting and export to financial systems. And then if you use timesheet approvals, you'll be familiar when she's completed and submitted her timesheet, the approval workflows determine the process for the time approval. And so these approvals can be created automatically based on your company org chart. There's something called Org Chart Manager in Journyx that will do that for you. You can set them up manually if they don't follow the org chart specifically and you need multiple levels and custom types of workflows for different types of employees. Or, as I mentioned, you can also create them automatically using your GP data based on that Supervisor field, and that's a single level of approval. That option is used by some, but not others, because many people who have been using GP and decided to use Journyx, part of the reason they wanted Journyx was for the flexible multi-level approvals. Now, for this employee here, after she's tracked her time, she may want to take some leave time. And so, again, with the GP package including Accrual Calculator, she's able to see her correct leave balances right there on her timesheet. And the Accrual Calculator is very flexible in terms of how these balances are accrued. There can be the word's not grace periods, trial periods, essentially, where you accrue nothing or you accrue less, and then they come online. There can be, first year accruals versus third year accruals, etc. So there's a lot that you can do. Overtime can, at times, based on certain pay codes, can be used to accrue time, and so on. So a lot of people have chosen to use the Accrual Calculator to handle their accruals rather than using the GP engine for managing accruals. So our end user here is able to check her accruals and then go to her leave calendar, knowing that she's got time available if she'd like to take some time off. If you haven't used our leave requests, it's another popular feature for those who are using GP. So she's able to check and see that she has enough time to take time off. Then she can send a request to her time approver, and she'll receive a notification as to whether it's approved or declined. And then she doesn't have to do anything else. It will just load automatically into her timesheet at the time she takes it, unless she decides to cancel it before that time. Now, based on her custom role, this particular user also has access to expense and mileage. And so she has screens where she can enter her reimbursable expenses and mileage for approval. Now, Journyx does include configurable conversion rates for converting from one currency to another, or converting distance like mileage into currency. And expense entry includes options for importing credit card statements to create your expense vouchers, and attaching electronic copies of receipts to specific expense items. Now, just like time, the expense and mileage can be subject to those workflow approval processes, and you have the multiple ways to create those. Now, Accountlink for MSD includes options for sending then that expense data back to GP in addition to just the time data. So you have the option to do one or both. So let's log back in as our admin. Now, as I have mentioned, one thing to note about the GP automation for approvals, it only allows one level of approval based on that supervisor ID. So if you want to require more than one person to review and approve time for individuals, then it might make sense for you to set up and assign your approval plans independently of GP. So you would just continue to manage those in Journyx. Now, for approvals, you may have the option to approve based on the summary view here, or you may need to click through to the sheet to review the time before you approve it. And most of you have probably seen this, but you have all the information that the end user could see, as well as some additional information, such as I mentioned those pay and billing calculations. You have the option to set up and review these on people's time entry screens as you approve, so you can see your pay and billing calculations and see the rules associated with them. Now, there are a variety of ways that our approvers can keep track of compliance and make sure that they get those approvals completed, so that they can get all of that time and expense data back in to GP. And one of those handy tools is the Organization Compliance Viewer. And it includes a quick view of any period for approvers to allow them to see who submitted their timesheets for the period and who's late, just little color-coded icons. And there is a legend here that allows you to see exactly what all of this means. You can also use these icons. You can click on them to take actions such as send an email to somebody who's late for the periods. It just makes it quick and easy to close out periods when you're wanting to get that time and expense data back into GP. It also allows you to check and see that you are in compliance as an approver and have approved everything for the period. So after approvals are complete, then you have the option to send time and expense data back to GP. And this looks pretty much exactly like the import that we looked at. It can be previewed and then, of course, marked as exported. One thing that the .NET client will do is when you run the sync, it will automatically mark your records as exported. So there's no need to take that extra button step and export the records that you've, or mark as exported the records that you've previewed. But it's basically the same process, transferring that time and expense data back to GP. And then, of course, you can set this up to, just like the imports, to run on a regular schedule if you are disciplined enough about your approvals to have them completed on a regular schedule. So whether you run that export manually or through an automated process, all of your exported time and expense data is going to come back into GP under timesheet and expense batches. And the batch ID will always be the date of the export, so the date that you synced those records from the Journyx system. And so what these batches do is they allow you to then post to your project accounting tables and to the GL. So at that time, you're able to view your time and expense data for project accounting and potentially, if you use GP, potentially for payroll as well. Now, during the time between approval periods, while you're waiting for the latest time and expenses to be approved and sent over to GP, you can, of course, continue to monitor your project time data in Journyx, and we have a variety of reporting options for doing that spot reporting. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to a site that has, since we just did a small import here, we're going to switch to a site that has a little bit more data in it. Now, the Journyx platform includes text-based reports that you can run directly in the browser, or report link templates where you can do your custom and graphical reporting in Excel. The browser reports can be scheduled to run on a recurring basis, and then they can be saved and copied or emailed. And we can look at scheduled reports. We can set up a schedule for a specific report. And then on saved reports, we have options to copy them out to people who are in the system or email them, in which case you can actually type in email addresses that may or may not be in the system. Now, both solutions are browser-based reports and ReportLink include a variety of time, expense, project status, and financial report types that you can either build from scratch or customize, like some of the canned reports. And these are, there are no technical skills required to be able to do this. So we can just run a quick time report just to take a look at some of the spot reporting. And of course, they can be viewed in various formats. And I don't have this open in Internet Explorer, but of course there would be a fourth format, Cube Report, which takes it into a limited functionality type of pivot table in the browser. Now, if we move on to ReportLink, there's a lot more that we can do with pivot tables. So let's take a look at some of our samples. So Journyx ReportLink is an optional reporting engine, and it allows you to tap into all that power and flexibility of Excel pivot tables. It is accessed via the Journyx menu in terms of where you grab your download in templates right here in the Report Link Exchange, but then you'll be pulling the data or refreshing the data in Excel, running your reports in Excel after you've installed Report Link. Now, this is not an export to Excel. It provides you with direct real-time access to your data via this Journyx tab right here. So you have login information, dates, and so on. And with the refresh button, you can get real-time data from your Journyx database just with the click of a button. This template here shows a pivot report and chart breaking out project time by cost category. So using some of the GP information. And so it allows you to monitor what's going on with your time even before it gets back over into GP. The templates can include both text-based pivot reports and charts based on the pivot data. You can also load the data directly into a spreadsheet and skip the pivot table data altogether. But again, that refresh button always keeps your data current. So it's not an export, it's direct access to your database. And you can customize the charts and graphs in these. Show some of these pivot field lists. For example, I could drag and drop a field into the pivot table and just add that data that quickly. So some basic knowledge of what to do with pivot tables allows a lot of flexibility with your reports. Got another sample here by pay code. But you pretty much have unlimited access to manipulate that data in the Journyx system while you're waiting for the period to close and the information to move to GP. And it can be used to actually audit what goes into GP. You can use your Journyx reports for comparison to the information that is ultimately loaded into GP. Oop. There we go. Well, that's a long way around. So that concludes the training portion of today's presentation. We will come back when the .NET app is in beta testing. We will come back and do another session where we'll demo the .NET app. So if you're interested, if you're thinking you might hold off on implementing a GP integration until that .NET app is available, we will certainly have another session where you can review how that works in detail. Obviously, the benefits for integrating your Journyx system with GP are going to vary based on the problems that you're trying to solve. But what we've done is we've tried to come up with a solution to help overcome some of the limitations associated with Microsoft Dynamics Business Portal, which is what many GP users have previously been using for their time entry. So, the fact that Journyx can capture accurate data without human intervention saves time and eliminates the hassle of making all those corrections, which can become very difficult. And then, of course, we track corrections that are required post-approval. Flexible approval plans are a big selling point to many people because again, Business Portal is a single level of approval based on the supervisor field, and many people needed a more robust process to sign off on project and leave time. And so they have that option where multi-level approvals can be configured based on whatever process fits. And lastly, the Journyx system, of course, provides the employees with all the information that they need to stay on top of their project time, enter it accurately, and then also request their leave. So at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open up the floor for questions. And I'll just apologize if the questions don't come through right away because I seem to be having memory problems on my computer. Yeah. Oh, well. Let's go back to slideshow and see if I... Just a moment. There we go. Now I think it's catching up. All right. Well, looks like we don't have any questions. If you think of any questions later on, please feel free to contact us. We will be sending, I believe, a copy of the recording for this session, but if not, we will certainly be sending a follow-up. And we thank you for your time, but if you think of any other questions, please just email us and let us know what it is that you'd like to know, what more information you would like on our solution for Microsoft Dynamics GP. Thanks again.